What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm just going to be giving you guys the first educational video of 2026. I'm going to just be going through some different layouts that I notice can benefit a lot of different style league bowlers. So I have 5 different layouts and 5 different bowling balls here. The bowling balls themselves really don't mean anything. Just was grabbing balls off the wall that looked cool that I wanted to draw on. Kind of 5 general different styles or archetypes of league bowlers that I noticed that are the most common. Obviously, there's going to be some mixing and matching with some other league bowlers that just don't exactly fall into one of these 5 categories. But these are the most general ones that I notice, and hopefully this information can help you lay out your next bowling ball to be a little bit more optimal for your play style. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is obviously layout isn't everything. Selecting the right bowling ball for your style, and more specifically for the bowling center that you are bowling in as far as league is concerned, is way more important than the layout itself. But if you do get that correct bowling ball and you don't get the correct layout on it, you can render it useless, or you're just not really getting the most out of that bowling ball that you should be getting. So we're going to try and get you all the sauce together to be able to strike, to average 20 pins higher in 2026. This is the year for striking, all right? So here we go. So the first style of bowler that I'm going to start with is kind of the middle of the road kind of bowler. I don't want to say the regular league bowler, but someone who just has like a moderate amount of ball speed and a moderate amount of rev rate. What I quantify that as is, low to mid 300 rev rate on the monitor. If it reads about 15 miles an hour, 15 to 16, we'll call that the middle person. Alrighty, the average bowler. So here, what better to put on than phase 2, right? The everybody's ball. But typically for this style of player, I'll go with a pin between 4 and 5 inches. And the reason for that is because they don't throw it super fast, so we don't need an extremely strong pin. So we want to be able to save some energy for the back end, because energy retention is what gets you that nice pin carry ball going through the pins the right way, things like that. So between 4 and 5 inches is a nice little sweet spot. And then for the mass bias, if it is an asymmetric ball, anywhere between like 3 3/4 and 4 3/4, 4.5, around that range, to really get the mass bias working but not overwhelming the ball reaction. Because when you go a little bit too strong on the mass bias, let's say 3.5 and under, which about 3.5, 3 3/8 is like the maximum you can really position the pin and the mass bias. Once you go a little bit too strong on that, the balls start to straighten out a little bit too much down lane. That's when your ball starts hitting a little bit flat, leaving the flat 10, and then you start missing the 10, you get frustrated, and then you want to quit bowling. We've all been there. So I don't typically go too strong on this style of bowler because, average ball speed around 15 when it's exiting, maybe a little bit lower. You're probably typically not having issues with the ball hooking on the back end, unless you're bowling somewhere that is a little bit slicker. Then you would just get a stronger ball, but you could still probably use this layout here, which on this specific ball, I just kind of sliced it right in the middle. I went 4.5 with the pin to PAP, 4.5 on the PSA, which this ball has no mass bias, so it's just the PSA. And then for the buffer is actually very important because that's going to control how big that hook window is and how it's going to transition on the back end. So 2.5 here is kind of like my sweet spot for most people. And for all of these balls, for the PAP, I just used 5 inches over and 1 inch up. Just kind of, they felt like nice generic round numbers. So obviously, like for myself, 4.5, 2.5 is going to look a lot different considering my PAP is not 5/1. It's way different than that. But for this particular person with a 5/1, it's going to be pin over the ring there. Pretty generic layout. But this kind of gets you in that middle sweet spot. 4.5 is technically on the weaker side of the whole bell curve of weight blocks because bowling balls are round. 90 degrees or a quarter of the way around the ball is 6 3/4 inches. So once you go to 3 3/8 inches, that is placing the weight block at 45 degrees, maximum tilt. That's where you get the maximum flare. But as we all know, maximum flare and all that does not equate to more downlane hook. A lot of times it equates to less. But depending on the style of bowler, like we'll get into later here, if you're a little bit higher ball speed, you're going to need a little bit more of that wobble. If you're the other way, a little bit lower ball speed, a little bit less wobble. All right? That's the middleman. If you are the moderate, middle, regular bowler, something around 4.5, 2.5, 4 3/4, 4, 2, 5 inches with 4 by, 2. Somewhere in that ballpark should get you a nice shape on the back end. All these layouts are going to be relative to the bowling ball. That's another important thing to remember, is that no matter what layout I put on a Phase 2, it's never going to be the most skid flippy ball, no matter if I put the most skid flippy layout that I know on it, just because the layout is modifying the ball motion relative to what that ball's supposed to give you. All right. So like I said in the beginning of the video, choosing the right ball is first and foremost. That is the most paramount thing. Also, getting your PAP is also 1A and 1B. Those are the two most important things as it pertains to this video. But that's kind of your middleman layout, 4.5, 4.5, 2.5, somewhere around there. You can go up or down about a half an inch or so, and you'll be in the right ballpark. But let's move on to the next guy. So the next player we're looking at is the slightly higher rev rate but moderate ball speed kind of person. This is, out of the 5 categories, it's probably the closest one that I'll fall into. So to just try and give you a visual of what kind of player that would be. Higher rev rate, into the 400s, well into the 400s, and then kind of just middle of the road ball speed. If the screen's reading about 15, 16, 16 and a half, that's kind of the guy that I'm talking about here. But someone that likes to really shape the ball, especially on the house shot. Can't really stand too far to the right, but you don't really need to stand too far to the right when you're a higher rev rate guy. So for this person, I'm using a layout that I use a lot for myself, specifically on the asymmetric balls, but I pulled out a Rockstar for this just because, again, I like looking at the Rockstar. Hate me if you will for that. But this is 5 by 5 by 3. I would say for this person, getting the pins definitely above 4.5 inches. Depending on the ball is very important, just because with the higher rev rate and not super high ball speed, you're going to want a little bit more energy retention. You don't need the core to really spin up too fast. And then as far as the buffer, definitely staying below 2 inches. Like this one here, I chose 3. That's kind of a sweet spot for me where I still see a good amount of continuation on the back end. The ball's not trying to straighten out too much. Obviously, like I said, you can modify these numbers depending on your specific play style or how you like to see the lane, but this is kind of a general starting point here. If you're a higher ball speed, definitely if you're 450 and above, messing around with the 5-inch pins is definitely something that's going to be useful for you if you feel like, maybe in the second half of your league set, end of game 2 into game 3, when you start moving left, you're not really seeing the ball shape on the back end and get the corners out. Your ball is probably just losing energy. So you're going to want to see a little more energy retention with that, 5-inch pin, 5 1/4, even you can dabble in 5.5 if the ball flares enough. And then you'll start seeing a little bit more easy length and more shape on the back end. But again, relative to the bowling ball. So you have to match up the right bowling ball for that situation and the right layout. But if you're a high rev rate guy and you do know your PAP and your pins are about 4 inches or so, and you're struggling when you're starting to move to the left, try a 5er. That's where I am typically. And, obviously, as you guys have seen, if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, my ball's shaped pretty good from left. So there we go, the higher ball speed guy with the moderate rev rate. Not a lot of you guys out there, but there's some league ballers like that out there. But let's move on to the next guy. Lots of these out there. Lots of these. So here on this Equinox Solid, this is the layout meant more for the high ball speed guys. The guys that really just fire it down there. A lot of these guys are probably 6'4", 220 pounds of pure muscle, just fling it down there. There's also some short guys that do as well. Higher ball speed guys, this is the first high ball speed person that we're talking about. You're going to need some help from the weight block. So that's why I chose an Equinox Solid, just to show you a little bit of asymmetry. For this layout here, I've got 4 by 4 by 1.5. Back in the day when Storm used to put the little layout papers in each of the bowling ball boxes, kind of their typical strong layout, or strong down lane they'd technically call it, was like 4 by 4 by 2. And that's kind of the layout I go for most people who aren't super rev rate inclined, because that 4 inches, again, it's not too far off from that 3 3/8. It's a little bit longer, so it still exploits a lot of the differential in the ball, so it's going to get to flare. It's going to get to slow down for you. It's just a nice starting point for someone who throws a little bit faster or just doesn't hook the ball all that much. So 4 inches pin to PAP, and then 4 inches on the mass bias as well. the same thing as the pin. It's really just going to get that mass bias working for you. And then 1.5 inches, the shorter you go on that buffer, the faster the ball is going to want to slow down or straighten up, however you want to call it. And that's what higher ball speed people are looking for. So when I would say 99.9% of people deliver the ball will be traveling faster than the ball is spinning. And then to achieve optimal pin carry or optimal ball motion, you want your ball spinning as fast as it's traveling down the lane right as it hits the pins. It's what I'll call the 1-to-1 ratio. And there's something called a release ratio, where pretty much the higher that number is, further your ball is away from traveling at that 1-to-1, off your hand. So higher ball speed and not super high rev rate people are going to have that super high ratio. So they're going to need help from the bowling ball to get it down to that 1-to-1 ball roll. Obviously, there's like the 6 degrees of entry angle that dictate carry and strikes and all that, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about getting the ball to slow down in the right part of the lane and getting that 1-to-1 right before the pins. And that's what all these layouts are for, matching up your play style to get to that 1-to-1 right as it hits the pins. And obviously, it's going to change with the oil moving around and such, but these are just ways you can orient the core to match up with your style to get to that 1-to-1, hopefully at the right time. As you notice here, this is the shortest pin that we have used so far, as well as the buffer. So this ball, all else being equal to those other layouts, should stand up much earlier, much quicker, which is going to match up with someone who is delivering the ball down there on the screens. If it's reading 18, 19, they're really getting it down there. You're going to need that ball to slow down. Because if you do go with something like that 5x5x3, the ball is just going to keep rotating sideways, not really getting to that roll, not going to roll through the pins. You're not going to see proper pin carry. You're not going to see proper ball motion. So it's just no good for anybody. But if you're someone who likes to play right, likes to just pipe it down there, whether they're shiny or dull, it's going to be kind of dependent on your bowling center. But layouts kind of in this ballpark, 4x4 by 1.5 inches, 4x4 by 2. Depending how speed dominant you are, you could go even shorter on that pin buffer. I have done some like 4x4 by 1s, 4x4 by 0s for some people. In very extreme cases, I have gone like 3.5 by 3.5 by 1. I did have a customer recently that I've done a couple of that for, and he's seeing his ball actually shape and go through the pins. He wasn't particularly super high ball speed, but he had a lot of rotation and not a lot of rev rate. So kind of the same issue as the high ball speed person would have, but different. Just not getting the ball to slow down and straighten up while it goes to the pin. So you can, like I said, make the weight block do that for you. But there we go. The high ball speed guy. 4x4 by 1.5 inches, 4x4 by 2. Give it a try. But we'll move on. This is probably the person that I see most commonly at, especially Holiday, because we have a lot of senior bowlers at Holiday Lanes. The low ball speed and kind of moderate to low rev rate. Pretty much the dead opposite of what you're going to want for the high ball speed player. You need the ball to retain energy, and you don't want it to transition too quick. So what I've chosen for this ball is a 5x4.5 by 4. For most people, it should land the pin under the fingers. I don't know if you guys can see my little makeshift finger drawings, but the weaker pin with 5, you can go even longer, depending how slow you throw it. It's going to delay that weight block trying to wobble its way back to stability. So it's going to push the ball reaction a lot further down the lane. But the big part is that pin buffer. Again, on this ball, we're thinking symmetric for this person. So the middle number, the PSA to PAP, not really super relevant. But for the pin buffer, we want to go longer, because you can think about it this way. The shorter you make that pin buffer, the shorter you're making the hook window, or making the ball transition. The longer you make that pin buffer, the longer you're making that hook window. So for somebody that throws it really slow, you're going to want to lengthen that window so the ball is a lot rounder as it transitions, because obviously if you throw it 11, 12 miles an hour, you're not really needing quick response, because your ball's taking 3-4 seconds to get down the lane. It'll hook. So you're wanting, again, to try and get to that 1-to-1 as it hits the pin. So you're going to try and delay this ball as much as you can. And chose an IQ Tour because that felt appropriate, but doesn't necessarily have to be that ball, like I said. Longer pins, 5. You can even go 5.5, depending how slow this person throws it. But getting that pin under will really help that person see a little bit more of a progressive hook rather than kind of the hook stop that a lot of the lower ball speed players get with the technology nowadays, because the balls have gotten so strong. Those kind of people are really struggling to see their ball hit the pins properly, get the corners out. So longer pins, longer buffers is where you're going to want to be for maybe, I don't want to age anybody, but for the elderly, for younger kids who don't throw it super fast, that haven't gained any muscles yet. Give that a look. Long pins, long buffers, and now we'll move on to the last person, who's the most interesting to me, and the one that I've struggled with the most, but luckily I don't get too many of them. Here we go. So the last person that we're going to talk about is the low ball speed, high rev rate or high rotation, or high rev rate and high rotation person. And there are kind of two ways you can go about this. And this one's going to be very dependent on how the person likes to play the lanes, how they like to see the lanes. You can either go with the same kind of layout, the pin down, long pin, as the regular slow ball speed, moderate rev rate person, or you can go with an extremely long pin to PAP with an extremely short pin buffer. And what that does for you is the long pin to PAP really gets the ball motion to delay down the lane. But since this person has such a high rev rate or a lot of rotation, when you have that, you need the ball to slow down and start going forward. So that's where the short buffer comes into play. So again, that short hook window, it's going to push the ball motion down the lane, but it's going to get to straighten out. A lot of these kind of players, they struggle hitting the right side of the head pin consistently, or when the lanes start breaking down, their balls just transition a little bit too much. So why I typically stay away from like the 5 by whatever this ball was, 4.5 by 4, the pin down layout, is because that hook window is so long and the flare is going to be a little bit less. That person can actually see a little bit too much continuation when it touches the friction because the ball is not straightening out when it's pinned down. So short pin buffer is going to get to effectively roll out, which is what this person's looking for, to either be able to control the pocket or to create optimal ball motion. If you're someone that is struggling with that, if you feel like you throw it really slow, you rotate the daylights out of it, you're always having to stand in the left gutter and you really don't want to, this ball specifically, I laid out 5 3/4 by 5 by 1, so super short buffer, and that's going to make the pins really, really tall. See my finger drawings right there, pins all the way up there for this 5 by 1 PAP. That's going to give you that push, and the ball is going to really straighten out once it does hit the transition phase and start hooking. So that's a good thing to try if you're really struggling with your ball, just continuing too much, hooking too much. Really get the ball to push and then stop. And then you can, again, modify that ball motion accordingly. So that's it, guys. That is 5 general different kinds of players that I see, and these are 5 different kinds of layouts that you can typically use to really exploit and really, optimize your play style. Again, selecting the correct bowling ball for you as it pertains to that bowling center is the most important thing. But putting the right layouts on them will take it a step further and really give you ball motion that you're looking for. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want another layout video, if you guys want to know how I lay out my bowling balls typically, the reasoning behind them, if you guys want tournament layouts, how they differ from league layouts like these, I can give you that as well. Just let me know down in the comments below. But hit that like button and that subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications to get notified whenever a new video drops. And if you guys like any of the jerseys we wear on this channel, EFX.co, link is down in the description below. Use code MIT for 10% off at checkout. Helps you, helps me. But that is it, guys. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.